Do you sometimes feel hangover because you've responded to a situation with emotions, and then from a perspective of time, you kind of felt that that's not really how you wanted to respond? Or maybe there are situations where you just feel completely out of control of what's happening around you, and then you just wake up a little bit later and still wonder why you did it. Hi, my name is Coach Ted, and I am a neurotransformational coach and founder of a learningpretzel.com. And today, in this episode with my very dear friend, Meriam Boldewijn, we're going to talk about the F word, the feelings. Meriam, why don't you introduce yourself and say hello to everyone?
Thank you, Ted. Hello, everyone. My name is Meriam Boldewijn. I'm a wife, I'm a caregiver, I'm a motivational speaker, I'm the author of Caregiver 2.0 From Burnout to Powerhouse.
Welcome. Are you excited about this episode?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, as always.
Absolutely. And I think that it's such a powerful conversation to talk about the emotions and how we navigate through it. Because the subject of the emotions and the emotional management kind of like became a little bit of a woo-woo concept where I think it's estranged for many people. So if you're watching or if you're listening to this episode, pop a comment, say hello, tell us where you're watching from, tell us what's landing for you and what's standing out for you. And in this episode, we will try to help it break it down to tell why emotions matter, how we can process that, what are the opportunities to choose the different reactions, and what are the ways how we can actually manage our emotions. And if you haven't watched episode 1, where we talk about the beginning of the very personal, home of growth, personal development, I highly invite you to watch that episode, because we broke down how behaviors are created and emotions were explained in a concept of how behavior is created. Today, we are going to focus in this episode simply on understanding why emotions matter, how we can process and express them, and then how we can manage them to create different behaviors. Meriam, why emotions matter to you?
So that's a great question, Ted. You know, the way I feel, it has a strong impact on my health. So taking care of my emotions is a responsibility as well as taking care of my body is. What makes me happy? What makes me feel good? What makes me sad? Or what makes me fearful?
That's powerful. And I love that. For me, I think that I agree and second everything you said. But I think that for me, it's also very important because my emotional states actually directly impact how I show up in life. And they reinforce my relationships, whether it's a relationship with another person or with a challenge in my life. Emotions very often have this way of solidifying that relationship and keeping it alive, right? And not only that, I think that emotions very often can trigger us into a default response. And I am a firm believer that there is a healthy way to express every single emotion we can be going through so we can just gain control. But for that, we need to understand really how we can process our emotions, which, as you know, because we've spoken about that, and I'm happy to share that with everyone, that there's pretty much, I believe that there's pretty much only 2 ways of processing our emotions. We can either express them and really, immerse ourselves in them, or we can suppress them for whatever reason, right? Because people can have different reasons to, suppress the emotions. The way I look at it, Meriam, is that suppressing emotions is like trying to blow the smoke back into the chimney, right? When the fire is still going. And it seems like it makes sense because we don't want to see the smoke around. We definitely don't want to smell it. So we're trying to stuff it back in. But when the capacity of the chimney expands, what happens is that then we just erupt. And that's what happens with emotions, right? We just erupt. And the reason why this is really important, I really want you guys to hear this, because this is crucial in your emotional growth and in your personal growth, that when you don't have a control of the expression of the emotions, when they erupt, they very often hit on everyone who's around us and didn't deserve it, right? I see you nodding
Right.
your head, Miriam. Can you relate to that? Have you ever had a
Oh,
situation like that where you've just erupted with emotions without control, and then afterwards you had that emotional expression hangover that you wish you didn't respond that way? Can you relate to
yeah,
that?
absolutely, Ted. As you were telling this, talking about this, I thought of the time when Martin, my husband, he was a diabetic and he had many times when his blood sugar was too low. And
Mm,
I remember one night, I woke up at 1 a.m. in the morning and I had to get up at 5:30 to go to work. I woke up at
mm,
1 a.m. because he was restless. And that was a sign for me that his blood sugar was very low. So I
mm.
went downstairs, took some sugar, and came back, and he was already sitting on the bed. But before I could give him the sugar, Ted, he waved his hand and the sugar was all over the bed. And I
Mm.
was so angry. I was angry that can you imagine how it feels like? You have to get up early in the morning, but you have to clean the bed. I was so angry.
So how did you respond to that? What happened then? Because you've recognized that you were angry, right? That was the state you were in. So how did you respond it?
I I told him, why are you doing this? I
Mm,
was so mad. I wanted to punch him. Does it
mm.
make sense what I'm saying? That angry I was that? That's how
Absolutely.
I responded. I was really mad.
Mm.
I was
I hear
really
you. And you see, the thing that I think it's really worth mentioning, and I honor you for sharing that so vulnerably with our listeners and with our viewers, because guys, if you can resonate, if that resonates with you, if you can relate to that, please pop a comment and show Miriam so love for showing up so vulnerably, because I think that the crucial part is to understand about the emotions, right? That when we experience really, really heightened emotions, right? Like we very often just want to escape them, especially the negative emotions. If you're scared, if you're irritated, if you're disappointed, if you're angry, we want to escape them. We just needed an outlet because that energy has to come out some way. And when we don't learn how to navigate through a lot of the emotions inside of our experiences, what happens is that they get bottled up, right? And when something like that happens, is as if you shaken up a bottle of a champagne and it just poops, right? All over the place. So my question for you is then, how did you feel afterwards, after you've erupted and after you were angry and you expressed the anger, towards your husband? Like, how did that make you feel afterwards?
I felt sad. I felt sad. You know why, Dad? Because I realized that first of all, he didn't ask to be in such a situation. He didn't ask to be a diabetic. So I was mad at the disease.
Mm,
I was mad at the disease. And I'm so happy you talked about bottling up because that's exactly what I was doing. And the result of doing that, Dad, was that I
mm,
burned out.
yeah. And I think that it's particularly important, and I love for you to paying attention to highlighting this, that it wasn't him you were angry at, it was the disease, and that you recognize that he didn't ask to be in that situation and he got it, right? And then also the fact that, because all of it was bottled up, is led to a burnout. And
Mhm.
I can't highlight how much I can relate to that with my personal story, how I just kept pushing myself harder and harder and pretending that those emotions weren't important. And, I really got into a point where I just let go because I had no more energy to hold it all at the bay. And I think that this is the crucial part as well, that you don't realize how much energy does it take from you to suppress emotions until you let them go. And the reason why we struggle with control of our behavior, of how we express them, is not only because we've bottled them up for so long, but also because we've spent so much energy into suppressing them that when they come out, management of them is too overwhelming and it just slips out of our control. And I really want all of the viewers and the listeners to really hear this, because that's crucial. When you lose that control, it's not because you're a bad person. It's just because you've spent a lot of energy and a lot of time suppressing them. And you see, emotions buried alive never die. They fester and they rot, but they never die. And as everything that ferments, it creates fizz, it creates gas. You know what happens with fermented food, right? I still have this idea of like some, I don't know, sauerkraut or pickled stuff where the lid pops off because there's so much gas in it from the fermentation, right?
That's exactly
But that's what
what's
happens.
happening. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
happens, right? It just festers and ferments inside of us, and then it just erupts. And I love as well that you've spoken to how you've recognized that he wasn't in this situation on his own request, because I think that very often we are so consumed with suppressing the emotions and maintaining image and maintaining control of all of it around that we get blinded toward what's actually happening. And if you look at the emotions, if you strip emotions to the very, very basic, right? Anger would be a very high emotion, but underneath them, there would be like a sadness and a regret and fear and all of that, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why it's really important to understand is that below anger is fear.
Yep.
And you cannot get angry without that emotion. There needs to be a disappointment and resentment underneath it as well. And when we start from love, and there's a desire and there's a wish and there's all of those things, anger is the final one. And the reason why we get angry is because we fear that we're out of control inside of this situation. Meriam, you're talking and you're sharing with people so generously your journey of a caregiving, right? What's the biggest fear of a caregiver?
In my case, I was so fearful of my husband dying, of getting in a coma and then dying, I was not in control of his disease.
Yeah.
And I was so afraid that something bad
I hear
would
you.
happen to him.
I was afraid for my personal story. I was really afraid of being exposed.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid of being seen as weak. I was afraid of, being seen as incompetent. I was afraid of being, seen as without value. I felt like I wasn't valuable enough if I didn't do certain things. So that sense of control was very much attached to my perception of myself, my idea that I'm valuable because I can control those things and I can make them happen. And if they didn't happen, that was the real fear, right? It wasn't so much about being in control. For me, it was like, what will happen if I'm not in control? Then I can't control the perception. Then I can't manipulate, the perception of other people of me. And I think it's really important for us to highlight this for all of the viewers and listeners. And guys, please comment if this resonates with you, if you can relate to that when we are in that space, we do that out of a protection for ourselves, because we want to protect ourselves. and our brain listens. And
Oh, yeah.
emotions are very powerful, but they stem from thought and judgments. Emotions are not created in the moment. All of the emotions that you're experiencing in adulthood is either a form of a different emotion, of a simpler emotion that was created inside of a childhood and you have associations with. And this is when we talk about the relationships, right? What's your relationship with this? What's your relationship with that, right? With the challenge, with a particular state, with a turnout of an event. This is where we are actually diving into the library of our connections and associations with it. And that's how we bring them up into the surface. And we spoke in one of the previous episodes how we create stories about things and all of that. So we highly invite you to watch the previous episodes because there's a lot of real goodness in them. But Meriam, you've recognized that it wasn't your husband's intention to be in that state, and that you were out of control with your emotions, and that he didn't deserve them. You experience the typical hangover of emotions where we burst and then we feel bad for not having control, because when we're out of control, we can do all sorts of things, right? Without having the intention. So how did you learn to manage them? Like, how did you move forward from the moment where you realized that you don't have control over that, and that how you responded is not the way you want to keep responding?
So what I did that is I observed how I reacted, how it made him feel, right? What is it teaching me? You know, what is it teaching me? The way I react, how I express my emotions, how to react, how do you say that? What is it teaching me? That was the most important thing. That what is it teaching me?
And how did you learn then how did you learn to express those emotions? Like, what were you doing to help yourself express it? Because acknowledging emotions, right, and recognizing what they are is a one thing, and it's a crucial part, because a lot of that happens so quickly. It happens so quickly. We get like, there's a trigger, boom, 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 and there's a response, and suddenly we kind of like find ourselves on the other side of the situation and go like, hold on a second, what happened, right? So one of the key elements is really to bring the unconscious event into our consciousness, right? But and I love that you're saying that you looked into, what is the situation teaching me? Because that just shows you that you created a space where you have allowed yourself to be with the response just the way you were, and see what's the lesson inside of you that you can take forward. And I would love to know, how did you learn to recognize the emotions? Was there something that you did or something that you practiced that helped you express everything that's going on? Because, very often it's so hard to pin it down, right? You just find yourself saying that, oh, I just don't feel well, or I don't know, I was unsettled and all of that. But how did you manage to recognize that there was a fear and that there was an anger and there was all of that? Was there something that you were doing or practicing to help you with it?
Oh yeah, let me show you. I'm so happy with this question. I started journaling my emotions. That I started writing why I was feeling the way I was feeling. Why was I sad? Why was I worried? Why was I anxious throughout the days, and what caused it? What caused the sadness? What caused the anxiety? What caused my worry? Why was I worried? I started journaling that. And this is why it's important for me, for Meriam, to know why I'm happy, know what makes me happy, know what makes me sad, know what makes me fearful. And what I try to do is write it all down in my journal. So
Beautiful.
journaling is a way for me to find out, why am I feeling what I'm feeling?
And it's so powerful because I mean, you know, there's this whole thing to emotions, right? That how they were created and stuff like that. And very often what we assume them to be might not necessarily be the reason, right? That there can be
Mhm.
another reason why we're connecting to those emotions from some past experiences. But I love when you're saying about, you know, allowing yourself to express that and really to
Mhm.
journal about it, because the key important message in here is that we all need to understand that emotions are not permanent. Like the emotional
Yes.
state you experience is not permanent. It's a temporary, you know, trigger, right? And it's not to say that they're not intense. It's not to say that they're not overwhelming at times. It's not to say that, you know, they're expansive and they're very strong, but every emotion will pass. And I'm sure that many of our listeners and viewers can relate to that, that you don't stay inside of an emotional state forever. I mean, like, it can continue for a while, but at some point it's going to change. So it's important to keep that in a perspective. But what I love about the practice that you're talking about, the journaling, right, is that journaling is also one of the ways of processing emotions.
Yeah.
You see, we don't always have to tell them to someone. If you are not feeling comfortable with sharing those emotions with somebody, although if you can, I highly invite you to do that. But if you are not comfortable with sharing those emotions, I highly invite you to put it on a paper. Now, pen and paper, rather even than a notebook or like a phone note, is proven scientifically to be the most impactful form of expression. And what happens is you just give them air and allow them to be expressed without being directed at anyone else. And sometimes journaling can also help us to really find out and build a vocabulary to express ourselves.
Oh
Because
yeah.
when we bottle things up, they become this massive concept and they're all clumped together. So there's multiple ways how we can work through that. If you guys need any help, we highly invite you to reach out to us, send us a message. We'll be happy to talk you through some practices and some exercises. But just for the purpose of the time management for this episode, we just won't be going into the detail of it because some of the exercises just need some assistance or need more explanation. But when it comes to expressing emotions through writing, that might work for some of you. For some of you, it might be recording a voice message. That's, for example, what worked for me. I needed to talk, and I was recording a voice memo saying that I'm absolutely peeved off, and this happened, and that happened, and that happened. And what happens is when you allow yourself to express, you are embarking on this expressive reflection, which I'm sure many of you can recognize at some point if you're in your life expressing yourself, and only during that expression you were like, huh, that's interesting, right? Because there's a reflection, and this is how we begin to understand ourselves better. But what most people do, and that's speaking to what you were talking about earlier, is that we bottle things up.
Yeah.
And when we bottle things up, we don't allow them to be expressed. And we don't allow things to be expressed, we don't allow the triggers to actually be present. And when we don't allow the triggers to be present, we are keeping the lessons away from ourselves. And when you said, Meriam, that what is this situation teaching me, right?
Mhm.
I really love that because that just shows this openness to look for a lesson inside of it, right? You recognize what happened and then you were like, okay, well, what is this showing me? And I suppose that it's really important when things are repeating themselves, right? Like something happening again and again and again. And you go like, hold on a second, like what's going on in here? And then to look into what is it teaching me, right? I remember when I reached this depressive state where I just couldn't motivate myself further. and I wanted to do things, and I just felt sort of paralyzed. And there was so much at stake that I wasn't aware of back then, because today I speak with a very different perspective. But back then, every relationship was ending up in the same place. Workplace, I would end up being very resentful, and I would end up hating the places. And I very often waited so long that I was leaving in a whim, because I just had to get out of there, right now, which left me in the situations where I was, just without work for a while. And even though I was very quick to acquire a new job, I would very often start repeating my own patterns. And back then, I didn't realize that that was actually to the fact that I wasn't managing my emotional experience inside of it. And it wasn't until I recognized that there's a responsibility and there's a part that I'm playing in all of that, that circumstances and people on the outside of us is a one side, but that's outside of our control. When you look into what's within your control, and when you recognize that, yeah, you're responsible for some part of it, right? You can't take responsibility for what other people did and how I don't know, what it was, a recession or eruption, right? But when you recognize that there's a part that you're responsible for, and then you actually look not only into what this is teaching me, but also which part of this situation am I responsible for, and you're willing to invite that responsibility in. Now, for me, it was really challenging because I hit a wall of resistance. Have you ever been in a situation, Meriam, where you were resisting admitting something negative about yourself to yourself?
Oh, yeah. Definitely that. I remember that I have a blackout.
Yeah. I get it. No, but I just wanted to check in because, I remember it actually very vividly, because that was one of the most difficult parts for me when I embarked on this resistance. I was trying to take a responsibility. And inside of that responsibility, I actually embarked on even more emotions. So it was like a box inside of a box. And this is where I got stuck. And I was in that stuck place for a very long time, because for as long as I was resisting it, I wasn't able to fully acknowledge my responsibility. And I was only acknowledging the responsibility that felt comfortable. And that's what held me back. And it wasn't until I actually dove into the one-on-one coaching, where I highly invite all of you guys, if you know that there's something you need some help working through, we invite you to connect and set up a free consultation calls, see if we can help you, or see if we can at least advise you and guide you. But for me, that was the biggest game changer, because I didn't realize how much of a resistance I've actually had built up inside of me. And until somebody who was outside of me, who was skilled and trained to do it, was able to show me the 360 perspective, where I uncovered what's inside and from which different angles I can look at it and take different approaches in a way that worked for me, in a way that it wasn't flipping my world upside down, in a way that wasn't causing me to, have that fearful, like, fight and flight mode, activated so quickly. Only then I was able to start navigating through it. And guys, I can't stress it, that when you get to the point where you're okay with taking responsibility for your part, this is where you become conscious of making choices and recognizing if what you choose to do is helping you or whether it's hindering your effort. And I can't stress how important that is, because have I known that back then, I would have given anything for someone to help me with it. And that's the reason why I shared that with you, because back then I didn't think it was possible. I thought, well, this is just the way I am. This is the way things are.
Yeah.
I've tried,
Yeah.
I have evidence,
Yeah.
I failed, so it's not possible. And it wasn't until I've really reached out to get some help where suddenly I realized that we can go through the resistance. We can uncover the emotions. We can uncover the programming. We can start making choices. And if you are in a place where you know what you want to do, you've tried things, you've researched them, you've probably had a go at it multiple times, and you're still not able to create that change, I invite you to reach out. Because if you know that your life is worth more, that you are capable of more, and you know that you have way more potential than what you're experiencing and living currently, then reach out. Don't leave your potential for your afterlife, because that has no use over on the other side.
Oh, I love how you said this, that I bottled up my emotions. The result was that it wasn't good for my health at all. I burned out and it hurt my loved ones. So I invite all of you who are listening to reach out. There are ways,
Absolutely.
to
And the fact that we can't see them from that perspective is absolutely natural, because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, right? You need sometimes the external perspective, the external input to help you see
get
something.
guidance. Yeah.
And one of the things that I really think it's important to say as well is that this is not just about you. You are part of something bigger and something greater in life as well. But you are more valuable and more beneficial to everyone around you if you actually help yourself navigate through it. Because hurt people, unhealed people cause more pain. Unless we learn how to navigate through that and process that, like Meriam did, with reacting out of fear and anger onto a husband that wasn't faulty of it. It wasn't his fault, but Miriam was reacting to it because she didn't know how to manage those emotions back then differently. She didn't know how to navigate through those emotional states. And it takes practice. And we are all so individual and so unique that it's very different for us. And this is another piece of information that I want to say as we wrap up this episode, is that, there's a lot of people who serve a cookie cutter approach. We share with you things that are, common for many of us. But the reason why you're not going to get an A, B, C, D, step size for all of you to go through is because we know it doesn't work. There is a certain thing that can be applicable to most of people, but there's also a lot of that needs to be tailored individually to all of you, because every single one of you could have acquired that differently, has it programmed differently, and it stems from a different location. So my invitation for you is this: if you do know that there's something you're trying to achieve, trying to overcome, trying to learn to manage or express, or you don't know what it is, but you know that you want to do something about it, you know you're capable of more, and you know that you are able to do the work, do reach out. And whether it is us, we invite you. Whether it's somebody else, go for it. Just don't stay put in one place, because I know your life is worth so much more, and I know you're capable of so much more. The two of us, as I said in the previous episodes, we're no different than anybody who's watching this. We have just done an awful lot of work in the meantime to learn how to navigate through those experiences. Meriam, as we wrap up this episode, is there something that you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Dad. You know, think about the benefits when you know how to deal with your emotions. Now, one of the biggest benefits for me was that I can overcome challenges as a caregiver. overcoming challenges was one of my biggest, and still is one of my biggest benefits. So think about that, because you
Yeah.
are worth a wonderful life.
And I will leave you with this question. What would it mean to you if you were able to navigate through your challenges in life? If you were able to maintain a form of a control and actually find yourself in a position where you are inside of an empowerment that allows you to respond the way you want to, not to find yourself on the other side of the experience, regretting that you did it differently. With this, we're going to love you and leave you. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for watching and listening. There's going to be description of all sorts of instructions below, how you can join our group, how you can connect with either of us, what resources do we have for you. So thank you once again for tuning in, and we already look forward to talk to you in the following episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.